So this will be a demo of all three parts of Project 7. First, HDR. Second, panoramic images. And third, correcting perspective on architectural buildings. So I have already photographed using the HDR technique. This is demo files that you can actually download on D2L in order to experiment with. Obviously, you need to photograph your own. And the idea is that you should be making an image that is more including a view, not just including a window, which this image is not, not as much about the view as it is just including something indoors and outdoors. So get closer, make it so we can see some of what's out the window, but what we really want is we want to have, say, 25 to 50% of the frame actually including what's inside and making a good composition of what's inside in relationship to what's outside, right? So, try to give us some context to the room, give us some space, don't cut off half the window, give us like the whole window frame plus something else that we're looking at inside. So we're not just seeing what's outside, we're seeing what's inside. So what I'm going to do is I have all four of my images. You may have more, again, ensuring that you have an exposure where the darkest areas of the image are visible with enough light to see detail, going to the other end of the spectrum where the brightest parts of what are outside are dark enough to get detail. And the idea is that usually in one frame, we can't capture all of this. So I select all of them. I'm going to right click on it, or on a Mac, I hold down Control and click on it. And I select Photo Merge HDR. I don't know if you can see my menus, but it is, if you hold Shift, 6, and H together, that would be the keyboard shortcut to it. I'm going to reshare here because I don't think you can see the screen. And I'm just going to grab the whole desktop one, and I'll make this bigger. There. So our options are auto align, which we want, auto settings, which will make it a close brightness to what we need. You may very well need to edit it further in Lightroom after you're done with this HDR part. And then I leave on stack because that'll take all the images that you photographed and stack them together with the final image being what is visible. There is a ghost overlay option, which tells you where the camera seems to have, where something in the frame has seemed to move, which in this case, there's some sort of a blob here where my exposure is messed up. And then we can deghost either none, low, medium, high, and that is for getting rid of things that have moved. So in this case, I don't think that we're going to see any difference. Where you might notice it is really in the tree outside, where if it's windy, things may have moved around a bit, causing essentially ghosting, where it's there twice or more than twice. So I know for this image that none is going to work perfectly fine. And I'll go ahead and hit merge. Now I'm going to screen share back to Lightroom. And there's my final image. Again, just like any other image that we work on, we probably need to go and develop and do some adjustments. I'm going to just hit auto. Well, it looks like auto's already been hit. I'm going to increase my exposure so that I can see. There we go. Now we get a lot more detail in what's inside. And I'll probably pull my whites down a bit and my highlights down a bit in order to get enough detail in the sky to see it's a nice blue sky. But that's basically the idea, is you still need to do this editing afterward. All right, so HDR is done. Let's go to panorama. And what I was trying to demo in class was grabbing these three images. And I'll do two different panoramics here. I'm going to right click on it again and choose Photo Merge Panorama, which is Shift 6M, I believe. I'm going to screen share back to my page. I'm not sure if it's showing. There we go, desktop one, yeah. So this is what I was trying to illustrate, where because I turned my camera, if I'm on perspective, which it automatically found, it's going to line up those straight horizontal lines. Now what that's going to do is it's going to soften the edges of the frame, which I think you can see in this preview. I don't think it'll be that blurry in the final image. Just keep in mind, this is a preview. But it is going to distort that, so you might notice some differences. Now what you probably will recognize as not a good thing is if I go to spherical or cylindrical, will probably look pretty much the same. What it's going to do is it's going to curve everything. So things are like the edges of my frame here are equal in height to the middle of my frame, right? So things that are further away do get smaller, and my lines tend to curve. So that's not a good thing, at least not for this photo. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you like it, okay, fine. But to be more photographically accurate to my original intent, which was the center image being square on, this image is probably more correct. And I'm going to go ahead and click on auto correct or auto crop, which will get rid of the areas that are getting stretched. So I don't see any of that white background. And I should say that there is also a fill edges option, but I don't think it will work for this one because there's too much to fill in. Okay, it sort of worked, but doesn't work well, right? This bottom center, top center doesn't look right at all. So I'm gonna uncheck fill edges, click on auto crop. If I had been on cylindrical or spherical, that fill edges might actually be worthy of our time, which it appears that it's not actually going to successfully do. So, well, okay, it's filling in some, and now it's kind of giving me the preview, but the lines are not, the power lines here are copying from the wrong places. So it's usually better to just auto crop, and this is how you could turn it in. Although I should say for this one, this is probably the better, more accurate one. And I don't care about what the aspect ratio is, the height versus width, as long as you're using 3 or more images to create it. All right, so I'm going to cancel out of there. I'm going to go back into my Lightroom page here. And I'm going to try a different version. So I've got a landscape where I have this set of 4 images. Oops, there we go. Having trouble grabbing the right ones. There we go. And I'll go ahead and I'll merge those, and we can see what that looks like. So the more images you have, the more processing power you're going to need. So I say 3 or more because you might want to stick with just 3, planning ahead to make sure that you don't end up with so many images that your computer can't handle it. So here's what that looks like as an end result. This is on perspective. I'm going to flip through cylindrical, and you can see the right-hand side of the frame seems to take up more space. So spherical and perspective. Spherical is, how do I say it the right way? It is, well, they're doing a little bit different things when they line up, but perspective is typically going to be more horizontal, which I think for this project probably works, but it's lining things up just in different methods, different sort of mapping patterns. So I could go ahead and merge that. I go back into Lightroom, adjust my exposure, my highlights, my shadows, whites, blacks, contrast, all those sorts of things that we've gone over in the past, you should still do. I'm going to cancel because I think it's going to probably kill my, my processor. But I think you get the idea. Now I'll go down finally to perspective. And this is the one that we used in class right here. And again, do all of your editing. I would wait to crop until after you've done the transform option. You could do auto, you could do level, you could do vertical, you could do full. Full doesn't make sense for this image, so of course, use it within reason. But what I'd like you to get comfortable with is the guided one. And with this one, I click on this little tool in this circle here. and that's where I can trace the lines in my photo, or the vertical lines particularly. Approximating here. There we go. And then, if there is any, well, this will automatically crop it, but you can scale it back. And, it might be good to kind of get comfortable with these things. Obviously, vertical is going to mess up those lines that I just corrected, so that's not something I want to do. Horizontal kind of twists the image right and left. I would probably not, like, it seems like it's getting out of whack when I do that here, so I would not mess with that one particularly. But you could also, if you have any rotation issues, if it's just a simple rotation and not a sort of tipping back or tipping forward feeling, you could do that here, although I believe that the level tool and the crop tool is probably better, because you can just trace to something you know to be vertical. So aspect ratio, I would use this only consciously knowing that you're distorting your image when you do it, but you can make things a little fatter or a little bit skinnier, taller, wider, I guess I should say, with that. So it's something that I have occasionally used, but only when I know that there are not things that will get distorted. Scale, I'm going to reset back to 100, but that's where I did this so I can see if I wanted to crop, whoops, if I wanted to crop something. There is an X offset to move things left, right, and there is a Y offset to move things up, down. So if you feel like you're cutting off part of your image that you wanted, or you want to get the frame closer to a corner, you can play with those. But this is, this guided, or these different options here are what you should be doing for the third part of Project 7. Keep in mind that, as we discussed in class, you should submit a before image and an after image. So an unedited image where we can see that the lines are, ideally photograph it intentionally a little crooked. So we can see the difference between the two. And let's go ahead and we'll put those on a slide. I guess you could say put them side by side on a slide when we do the critique. So that is all of our steps. So make sure you're editing them in the develop tab, particularly in the basics, but I would be at this point really comfortable with using these other gradient, radial gradient, and adjustment brushes. And for anything that's minor, I would probably get comfortable with doing some small spot removal retouching. And I think we've already said this, but you should really be comfortable with the crop tool and cropping things to what makes the most sense by now. Okay.